Hey, and welcome to Leadershipisation, all things leadership. Let's start by seeing how this statement lands with you. Your standards may not be the problem with your team. Your standards may not be the problem with your team. Now, I know that you're probably wanting quality work, you're probably wanting accountability, you're likely to be wanting results, and you're likely to be wanting your people to step up. And none of that is unreasonable. None of that at all is unreasonable. But if you're delivering those standards with a lot of emotional intensity, then something shifts. And it's subtle, but it actually happens. You're delivering and you're saying whatever you're expecting with urgency, with frustration that's visible to other people. Maybe you're constantly checking in on people. Perhaps you've identified that there's a real personal investment for you in the outcome here. The shift that happens with your team around this is very real because people take on and they respond to that emotional climate that you present them with around the expectations. And what happens is they shrink. They become more careful, they become more dependent on you, they become more focused on avoiding mistakes. And when all of that happens, they then become less focused on creating the kind of impact that you're looking for them to create. And over time, you can end up leading a team that's working extremely hard. They're working really hard, but they're not growing and they're not nearly as strong as they could be. Because, high performing leadership, it's not defined by how high you set the bar. It's actually defined by how steady and calm you remain while others learn to reach that bar. I'm Beth Bergen. I'm a global leadership communication coach, and I'd love it if you would join me now for 20 minutes or so as we explore this topic. Because if your team's capability isn't expanding at the speed that you expect, it's worth looking at what exactly they might be reacting to. So we've got 5 talking points today, and the first one is this: that the intensity that you use changes behavior faster than standards do. The intensity, the emotion that you use to explain what you require changes behavior faster than standards do. Look, our brain, it keeps us safe. This is basic behavioral psychology. Our brain is going to keep us safe, and it will do that as opposed to stretching us. Okay, it feels better, prioritizes that for us. So when you present with lots of emotion and a very visible urgency, our brain naturally perceives a bit of a risk there. And when it perceives that risk, it contracts, it closes down, it narrows our focus or our team's focus so that it's all about compliance, it's all about doing and getting the work done and completed rather than being about innovation. So your emotional your intensity might get more effort, but it actually creates in the short term, but it actually creates less ownership. So that intensity and those emotions might in the short term create movement, but they do not contribute to growth. It doesn't fuel growth. The second point is this: as leaders, we very often, what we do is we attach our identity to the outcome. We attach our identity to the outcome. We tell ourselves, oh, if this succeeds, I'm going to be credible. Everyone will think that I'm absolutely awesome. If it doesn't succeed or it fails, I'm going to be really exposed. I'm going to kind of be out there by myself, and that's uncomfortable. And so when we tell ourselves that, when we attach that identity, we move to a space where we have over or more emotional buy-in to the result than might be healthy for us in our leadership, and it might also be not so healthy for our team. And what happens when we have that additional emotional buy-in is that we monitor things a whole lot more. We've got less patience. We're faster to intervene. And our team feels as though like they can feel that you've got a personal stake in this. Even if you've never said it, even if you've never verbalized it, your team will feel that you've got a personal stake. So their capability shrinks. Their capability shrinks when the outcomes feel as though they're really heavily emotionally loaded. And that's something for you to remember. They're picking it up on what's going on for you. Yeah. Yeah. You when you're attaching that identity to the outcome, they pick that up from you. The third point I want to talk to today is this: pressure-based leadership. When you're coming at your leadership from that point of pressure all the time, it creates learned dependence. Now that seems really odd. However, if you're intervening too early, your team stops stretching. They don't need to figure out anything else on their own, because what you've taught them is, oh, if I think you're stuck, I'll just jump in and fix it. And what happens is that they very quickly learn that coming to you for the answers or going to other people is their safest option. And so that intensity creates that kind of response in them. They respond to your intense leadership by asking you and dragging you back into it and using more of your time. And over time, they become more and more cautious, more and more risk averse. You see, the really weird thing is that autonomy grows. It grows when a space exists for discomfort. You have to be uncomfortable to experience and to encourage autonomy, because people are learning from their own decisions. And so that feels a little bit weird to them. So I guess another way of looking at this is that because what you're doing is building that learned dependence, you're actually creating an environment where your team is missing out on opportunities where they can grow. Yeah. And when it's put that way, what I find with a lot of my coaching clients, when it's presented in that way, they go, oh, I would never want to create a situation or an environment where I felt as though my team was missing out on opportunities to grow, especially if it was because I was micromanaging or putting such a heavy emphasis on my personal stake in this that they felt like they couldn't have growth or autonomy. The fourth point to look at today is this: inconsistent emotional signals create much more stress in your team than high expectations or high standards. Now, this one, I always find this one, people have to think this through, because they think that the pressure or the stress on their team is going to come when they set high standards or high expectations. They're fine. People know where the bar is, and they anticipate that you're going to support them to get to that bar. Now, if what happens is that you're calm one day and you are manic the next day, that's inconsistent. And your team then starts to use up some of their brain space to monitor you. What's going on? What kind of mood are they in today? And so they're constantly on alert because they wonder which version of you is going to turn up. That uses up their energy, it uses up their time because their focus becomes, well, I need to be a really expert mood predictor. And their trust for you goes down, not because you're setting high standards, not because you're setting high standards, but because the environment, the culture around them feels unstable. You know, predictability in you as a leader, predictability in your emotions and how you're going to show up creates that psychological safety that people are seeking. Now, here it's really important that I remind you about something, and it's easy for us to forget this. You're a leader. You have an important role in the organization. Well, let's say this a little bit differently. Your title means that you have an important role to play in the organization. People are going to be watching you because of your title. Even more of them are going to be watching the way that you lead, the way that you interact with people. So if there's this unpredictability there, that will feed into the rumor mill, which will all be going, oh, God, you know, you never know who Beth's going to turn up as. God, I guess we're all going to cop it today. You don't need that. What you need is your team recognizing that you've got their back. That brings us to the fifth point, which is about aiming for that performance tension rather than a personal tension. You want people, to be stretched. You want people to be enjoying their role and to be challenged in their role because that's energizing for them. Whereas if you're there and you're all over the place and your emotions are really volatile, that drains them. It doesn't serve them. That calm authority bringing that allows them, your team, it allows you and your team to focus on a solution. So, an important thing for you to understand as a leader is that your emotional regulation is going to multiply your impact as a leader. The more you can regulate your emotions, the more impact you're going to have as a leader. Now, obviously, there's lots of nuances in that. And they're kind of, they're the sorts of discussions that I have individually with my coaching clients. It doesn't mean that you can't be demanding the high standards. But there's a real difference between being demanding and being threatening. And what's important is that you find a way to be really clear and quite certain that this is what the standard, that these are the expectations that you have, without attaching so much emotion or so much volatility to it that your people feel threatened. Now, I've got a great tool to share with you today. The names that I have to make up for these tools really I look at them and I go, oh, yeah. But they're a great way for me to be able to differentiate between what all the tools are if I need to find them again. So, this one is called the intensity interruption. And like many of the tools that we have, this is about you asking yourself a question before you go into an interaction with one or more of your team. Ask yourself this question: am I about to add clarity or emotional pressure? I'll say it again so you can write it down. Am I about to add clarity or emotional pressure? Now, if the answer is clarity, awesome, go for it. If the answer is emotional pressure, then what I want you to do is just to take 3 or 4 deep breaths slowly and slow your pace down. Then I want you to think about the volume. How much emotional energy is going to go in that volume? Just reduce that back a little bit. I want you to think about how you're going to frame the urgency. Is there a different way that you can explain the urgency without it feeling like a whole lot of emotional pressure? Par it back so you're able to state the outcome that you're looking for really simply. You're going to provide less directions and you're going to ask more thinking questions. You want your team to have some buy-in, because what we're looking to do here, with this intensity interrupt is to reduce the stress transmission. We don't need to take stress from you to them. That's not what it's about. We want to reduce that stress transmission while we're preserving the kind of standards that you think are really important and that are actually important to achieve the goal. Yeah. So I'm sure that if you try that intensity interrupt, that will have some benefit for you and enable you to turn the dial down on that emotional pressure that you may be putting on your team, that intensity that in the very medium term results in them becoming more dependent on you rather than less dependent. So, a deep reflection question for you. Now, this is a question. I want you to think about it, write some answers, come back to it, and ask yourself, and what else? So, do people around you perform like your team, your peers? Do they perform because they feel inspired or because they feel tense? Do they perform because they feel inspired by the leadership, obviously, or because they feel tense? Now, obviously, the answer to this is going to help to give you some insight into how much emotional intensity is coming from other places in the organization to you, but also potentially how much emotional intensity you're placing on your team. So, this is just to give you an insight. So, the key takeaways today: intensity is going to give you some short term results, but it's actually a bit like a long term handbrake. So, dumping a whole lot of emotional stuff on people, being emotionally volatile, it's not going to serve you or your team in the long term. Look, the better you are at regulating your emotions, the more likely you are to scale your leadership results, to scale your influence. Calm, consistent. Yes, it's possible to be direct and demanding and kind at the same time without dumping a whole lot of emotional baggage onto your team. And the third thing is that teams enjoy the challenge of high standards. And they'll grow into that if you support them with this calm, consistent leadership. Yeah. Now, what I know is that many leaders are proud about how much they care about the results. That's kind of a bit like a badge. It's a real badge for them. But you have to take care to make sure that that's not expressed too intensively, because that can limit people's performance and it can limit the very team that you're trying to build. So be prepared to work hard at managing your emotions, because your team, if you can manage them, they'll work hard, but they'll be hesitant to be bold if they're not quite sure about where you stand emotionally. They'll lean on you more and they'll drag you back in. So you're feeling, oh, what, I never get any time away from them. I seem to be the key decision maker and central to every outcome. Now, if this pressure seems to be the only way that things are achieved, it might be that standard that you've set, that's not what needs to be adjusted. It may be how the standard is being communicated. So the pressure isn't around the standard. The pressure is around how the standard is being communicated. So if you're ready to explore how to lead with strong standards without becoming an emotional hindrance to your team, let's have a chat. There's a QR code on the screen now, and we'll make sure that we put a link to my calendar in the platform, in the chat, in the platform that you're watching this on. Reach out, because while emotional intensity can help people move, yeah, that steady leadership is actually what's going to make them grow. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you've got any questions or any comments, pop them in the chat on the platform that you're watching this on. Reach out if you've got some questions or you've got topics that you would like to see addressed. I'm very happy to introduce them. I look forward to spending some more time with you next week. Bye now.